Excited about this study. John is just one of my favorite Gospels. It's top 4 easily. And, all right. Y'all going to perk up already, I can tell. We're going to get going now. John chapter 1 is where we're going to begin in just a moment. And I've told you before, I'll kind of clue you in again, that schedule that's on the back of the handout that's on that table back there, we will follow that schedule. Okay, if I'm asked to teach the Gospel of John, we're going to cover the Gospel of John. I'm not going to dog us around and slow down and end up not covering the last 3 chapters and don't even talk about His resurrection. No, sir, not happening. Okay, we'll cover the material, and I don't normally have 4 months to cover material like this, but because of the way we're structuring some things, trying to get back on a quarter system that follows the calendar year, I got 4 months to teach John. So this is going to be exciting. I love this Gospel. A lot of good stuff in it. I think I told you the questions that are on your handout. I'm not going to cover these questions really in class. If you want, you'll get more out of the study by reading the sections and asking those questions. Maybe get a notebook and write the answers down. I don't hand out questions week to week. These are the questions. I want you to think about the text, what the text is saying, and not all questions have really good answers for every section. But they're designed to make you think about the text. That's what we're doing here. We're trying to get this text and put it into our daily lives to go serve the King better. So that's what we're going to strive to do. And I might once in a while throw in one of these questions. Like today, I'm going to probably throw in one of these questions. I think that they're good. So that's the plan. If you need one of these, they're in the back. And if we run out, I'll make more by Wednesday, even though it's singing night. So let's go ahead. John 1 is where we are. Let's go ahead and begin with a word of prayer, and then I'll make a few introductory comments, okay? So let's go to God in prayer. Father, we thank You for the blessings that You give to us. We're thankful for our time of study this morning. We're thankful for the Gospel of John, a book written for us that we might believe and to help us be more faithful in this earth. Father, we ask that You would watch over us in our study and certainly watch over us in our application of Your Word. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. So let's do some introduction stuff. I don't do a ton of introduction generally. I will say too that every point of introduction there's somebody on one end of it who doesn't believe that. And so every one of these points you could write a lot of material about. So if you have more questions, feel free to ask me. And if they're too long to answer now, I'll tell you. And we can talk about it some other time or in private or something after service is no big deal. So don't feel like you can't ask questions. So let's start here. The author of the Gospel of John is the Apostle John. So this would be the brother of James, one of the sons of Zebedee, the beloved disciple is how he calls himself in this epistle, or in this Gospel. Now I've already told you, a lot of people convinced it's John. There are some people who don't think John wrote it. There are other Johns that it could be. I think once you weigh all the evidence, this is the best choice. And there are a lot of good scholars that would say that too. So the date, somewhere around 80 to 94, can't be too precise. I take a later date on Revelation, so like 95. I think the Gospel was written before that. Either way, we can say it was 1st century because of the John Rylands fragment. It's a little bitty piece of a manuscript that has portions of the Gospel of John, chapter 18 on it. It's about the size of a credit card, and it is the oldest manuscript we have on record, sometime around 120, 130 A.D., In fact, some folks who really know their salt say that poetically say that the ink on the original gospel wasn't wet yet, or wasn't dried yet when this manuscript was written. Okay, so it's old. And it's a good point of evidence. A lot of good conservative scholars, even scholars who aren't Christians, say that's an old manuscript. Well, if it comes from this gospel, what does that mean about this gospel? It was before that manuscript. See? Everybody follow? Okay, all right. So think about the purpose. You know the end of the Gospel of John, chapter 20, verse 31, these things were written that you might believe. Yep, all that's right there. So the purpose then would be to evangelize unbelievers, to strengthen believers against oppression, which remember something, folks, we're getting to the end of the 1st century. Persecution's ramping up big time. Why is John going to write Revelation? Because persecution's been to ramp up big time and then major time. See that? Okay, so you have this gospel trying to help reinforce people. You can be faithful to Jesus Christ. And yes, I do think it's confronting some heresies as well, although that's not the main focus of the gospel. The theme, Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Now, one of your questions on the handout is, question 1, what does this reading reveal about Jesus, and or how is the theme supported? You might jot this theme down. This is what the gospel is all about. Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. So you're going to have some questions. That's going to come up. How does this support that theme? Well, you do know that we take the theme from the content of the message. We don't superimpose a theme. We take and read the message. What's the main thing John's putting out? That Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. Okay? Everything he does builds to that point. And by the way, I know there are some folks taking notes. I'm moving through this fairly quickly. If you want some of these things, I'll be glad to send them to you, okay? There are some very unique features in the Gospel of John. There are no narrative parables. You notice that in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the synoptic accounts, lots of parables, lots of that type of preaching. John's Gospel, nada. There is no transfiguration, which is really impressive because Peter says in 2 Peter 1 that the transfiguration was incredible. I'm paraphrasing in the Central Oklahoma translation. But then John doesn't write about it. Okay? The Lord's Supper institution. Now, I know that maybe you're going to get to John 6 and you're going to go, hey, what about John 6? John 6 is not about the Lord's Supper. Okay? We get these guys that make the comments up here once in a while, and they do a really good job. Don't use John 6. John 6 is not about the Lord's Supper. Sounds a lot like the Lord's Supper, but it's not the Lord's Supper. Okay? So that's not what's going on there. By the way, no casting out demons. Well, that's a big part of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Not in John. The temptation of Christ. Satan doesn't come to him and tempt him like he does in the other accounts. None of the synoptic sermons. Sermon on the Mount, the Sermon on the Plains. None of that's in John. The only long discourse we have from Jesus is in John 6. And it's nothing compared to the long sermons in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So it's kind of interesting you think about that. Most of what John shares then, we wouldn't know without him. I mean, you look at that section. Most of John 1 through 5, we wouldn't know without John. Most of John 7 through 11, we wouldn't know about without John. John 13, wouldn't know without John. All of 14 through 17. You seeing that? That's a big chunk of the Gospel of John. So he gives us a whole other perspective. Really, really valuable stuff. Pay attention to the contrasts or confrontations, comparisons. In fact, that is your question number 4. Is there anything being contrasted in this reading? That's kind of what I'm getting at right here. Read this gospel, look for the conflict. There's always a conflict, almost always a conflict. Light and darkness, life and death, love and hatred, truth and lies, spirit and flesh, above and below. And what's really being put in contrast? Jesus Christ and Satan. Or Jesus Christ and the powers of darkness. God and Satan. This is a big old gospel about conflict, contrast. So, told you we weren't going to take a whole lot of time to do that. Again, there's a lot of benefit in doing some good introduction stuff, and I've written a lot on introductions for the Gospel of John and things like that, but that's just not where our time is best suited. If you have questions on any of that, I welcome them, okay? Maybe I should just ask it here real quick. Do you have questions on anything I just went through? Okay. Final chance. There it was. All right. John 1 then. Now again, if you have questions, feel free to ask them. I will work through this text, and every so often, I will open it up. But I really want you to be thinking, we get towards the end of our class period, I'm going to open it up big time for applications. Okay? I don't do a lot of really heavy discussion type stuff, like I was doing the last several classes, but when we get into some discussions, that's where it's your time to shine, okay? Because we got to get this out where we can live it. So that's where I want you to be thinking too, okay? John 1, ready? Verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made by Him, and without Him nothing was made that was made. In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. Now I want you to think with me about this text. Verse 1, sound familiar to anybody? I'll let you say it. Genesis 1. So John purposely echoes Genesis 1. In fact, if you were to read the Old Testament Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, the words are exactly the same. Doesn't just sound like it, they are the same words. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, Genesis 1:1. But notice, the differences are noticeable, aren't they? In the beginning, John 1, was the Word. So when you see a typeset like this, what you're looking for is, here's something that's just exactly the same. Wait a minute, it's not the same here. Now we need to ask why. Because the readers are picking up on that, just like we are. Just like we are. Wait a minute. John's echoing Genesis 1, but 4 words in, totally different concept. And in some way, it's not a different concept. Think about that. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created heavens and the earth. John 1, in the beginning was the Word. What's he going to say at the last part of verse 1? The Word is who? God. So you see how he's saying the same thing. In fact, what he's doing, John 1 is a further explanation of what's happening in Genesis 1. See, you read Genesis 1, you might have some questions. You read Genesis 1, you think, okay, Spirit of God hovered over the face of the waters. Wait a minute, what in the world's going on here? And God spoke, and God said, and God saw, and what in the world is going on here? John 1 helps explain that. So we're going to get into that. So in the beginning was the Word. Now, if that's too ambiguous, every line further explains it. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. So, with God would be the idea of in harmony, in partnership. They work together. You think about how some of that really fits. When you see the concept of in the beginning, that's in the beginning of everything. You go back and read Genesis 1, what's before the beginning? Nothing. No thing. But why is there a beginning? Because God created the heavens and the earth. What's John saying? Why is there a beginning? Because the Word was there. The Word, verse 3, created. Okay, so eternal concept here. The Word was there when time started. Now, how does God create everything in Genesis 1? He spoke it into existence, right? So over and over and over again, Genesis 1, God said. You know what you speak, right? Words. Y'all seeing some of that right now? In John 1, we're getting a further explanation for what God did in the beginning. The Word was there. Why? Because the Word was in harmony with God. The Word, very much so, was God. Verse 2 repeats that idea. He was in the beginning with God. Notice, though, He was in the beginning with God. Now we're getting a pronoun. It's not just some ambiguous word. It's someone. So in verse 1, you're thinking, what is this? Now verse 2, you're thinking, who is this? That's going to be further explained, but not quite yet. Verse 3, what happens? All things were made by Him, and without Him nothing was made that was made. Well, maybe we should think about that just a little bit. What does that mean Jesus, gave away. What does that mean Jesus did? When you go back to Genesis, what did Jesus do? He created. You know, we don't think about it quite like that, do we? We generally speaking, we just think about God created. Actually, John 1 says Jesus created. So, let's back up to some kind of Christianity 101. God the Father designed the plan. What have we always said? Jesus is the one who executed it. Folks, it's the same with creation. God's the one who designed creation. Jesus is the one who built it. The Word, verse 3, was made by Him. Or sorry, the world was made by Him without Him. You notice that it's reinforcing that? It's not just, well, you know, He made everything. No. He made everything, and if He hadn't made everything, there would be nothing. You know, nothing is, right? It's no thing. So, Jesus created everything. And if you're kind of a side of the Bible note-taker person, jot down Colossians 1. Colossians 1, 15 through 20 says the same thing. Okay? that He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. Yeah, reinforcing the same ideas here. And also Hebrews 1. Both of those texts reinforce what John 1 is saying here. Jesus made all things. Verse 4, in Him was life, and the life was the light of men. So in Him was life. That is the expression of life, and by the way, the purpose of life. In Jesus Christ, folks, what we have is both quality of life and quantity of life. And both are found only in Jesus. A few weeks ago we were talking about Colossians chapter 3. And that's, our life is hidden with Him. And our life is yet to appear. Wait a minute, we have life now, but we also have life waiting. Yeah, it's because what we have in Jesus is quality and quantity. Purpose and meaning here, and eternally expressed life then. Okay? In Jesus is life. Then that life, verse 4, is the light of men. What does that light do? Verse 5, it shines out into the darkness. You notice something, folks. All of the verses 1 through 4 are past tense. It was the Word, was with God, was God, were made, was made, all that. Now notice what happens in verse 5. Present. The light shines. It's not the light shone, it's the light shines. What Jesus started in creation continues to be shining. So that light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. Somebody have something that reads differently at the end of verse 5? I know you do, so I'm going to make you say it. What is it? What's the end of verse 5? What's different? Somebody with a New American Standard? Somebody with an ESV? There we go. So the darkness did not overcome it. Another way of saying that, the darkness did not grasp it. Both of those ideas kind of complement each other, although they're a little different. But do you see how many themes from Genesis are in the first 5 verses of John? Creation, life, light. What was the first thing God did? Let there be light. What did the light do? The light scattered the darkness. And then what does God continue to do in Genesis chapter 1? Continues to give order and purpose in the creation. Takes what is chaos and makes conformity out of it. What's God doing in John 1? Same thing. Working off the same ideas, that's what Jesus is doing. What did I miss here? Somebody have something on that? Question or comment? Yeah, I would say that, I think there's two sides of that coin, Shelton. I think there's a sense in which not only did the darkness not understand it, but the darkness opposed it. That's going to come up again down in just a few verses. Verse 11, or verse 10 and 11, even a little bit in verse 9. I mean, we're going to see some of these flavors come up. Keep in mind, what did I say at the introduction? Big contrasts. Light and life is going to come up all over the place. What does Jesus call Himself, guys, in John chapter 8? He said, I'm the light of the world. Wait a minute. John just told us that. You see in this? So part of what he does, this is sometimes called the prologue, by the way. Part of what he does in this prologue is introduces a whole lot of the ideas he's going to spend the next 21 chapters unpacking for us. Jesus is the life of men. Jesus is the light of men. Jesus scatters darkness. And by the way, you think about how those two ideas just work off of each other all through this gospel. When it's dark in John's gospel, it is theologically dark. Not just literally dark. It's a big idea it's pushing. When Judas seeks to betray Jesus, what does he do? He goes out into the darkness. Y'all picking up on that? So you get some of these ideas right here in John 1. So yes, Shelton, I think it's both sides of that discussion. They didn't understand it and they opposed it. All right? All right, so we get our first human agent. Verse 6. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. This man came for a witness, to bear witness of the light, that all through him might believe. He was not that light, but was sent to bear witness of that light. That was the true light, which gives light to every man who comes into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, even to those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of men, or will of man, but of God. So now we have John, the one sent. Which John is this? The Baptist, or the baptizer. Had folks ask, is that his last name? No. It's what he was doing. He was a baptizer. So this is John the baptizer. Now, there is some maybe reasons to think, okay, John writing towards the end of the first century, there might have still been people who thought that John was the Messiah. And you see from our little paragraph here, John may be kind of working to correct that false view. That might not have been uncommon in the first century world. I mean, Paul runs into some people who only knew of the baptism of John and didn't even know about some of the other stuff with Jesus, the Holy Spirit and all of that. And so maybe John's kind of working to correct some of that here. It's very possible. So John came to bear witness of the light. You see in that? So here's what humanity is supposed to be doing. Pointing everybody to Jesus. What's John doing? Pointing everybody to Jesus. Everything John does works from this angle. Wants everybody to see the Christ. So that, the end of verse 7, all through him might believe. Belief is a big deal in John's gospel. I made that point in the introduction. Big deal. Belief, believe, trust, faith, all those ideas are going to pop up in contrast to those who don't believe. And by the way, what does he mention in verse 12? Sorry, verse 10 through 12. So he mentions, here's John preaching so that they will believe. Who's described a little later? Don't overthink this.
His own people.
Yeah, his own people. And those who don't believe, right? He went to his own did not receive him. That's an idea of belief. They didn't accept who he was. They did not believe him. And so you've got this in contrast again. Now very quickly, verse 8, he's going to correct this. Before anybody starts thinking this John fella is the light, verse 8, he's not the light. He's not the light, but he was sent to bear witness of the light. John's big deal was he was sent by God to prepare the way of the Messiah. We're going to get into that, aren't we? That's John's whole point, is to prepare the way for the Christ. And that's what he does. So, several times, you probably picked up on this already. Witness, bear witness, bear witness. You seeing that just pop up over and over and over again in those few verses? That's John's job. Man, maybe we should just tie over right quick. That's our job too. Even though I don't like the idea of, we're witnesses for Christ. Because I didn't witness nothing. By faith I see. So I think maybe we need to avoid that denominational idea, because I don't think that's biblical. I didn't witness it. But my job is to share it. Seeing that a little bit with John? John's sharing the message. Preparing the way of the Messiah. So, verse 9. He's the true light. True light would be in contrast, even though it doesn't say it here. True light would be in contrast to what? Darkness. Or even false light, right? And so you again have Jesus set on a pedestal. He is all that we are looking for. Everything. He is the true light, not the false light. Every person who comes into the world is lit up by Jesus. And we find our ultimate expression of light only in Jesus. So we're getting that idea here. We have life in Him, and true eternal life is only in Him as well. So verse 10. He was in the world was made by Him, the world did not know Him. Folks, is that not just terribly sad? You think about what that verse is saying. It's reinforcing. He went into the world. We're going to get right into that in verse 14. He went into the world. And even though the world was made through Him, we already established that, didn't we? Verses 1 through 5. He made the world, but the world didn't know Him. So, you see in this? Belief and unbelief. Truth and lies. Light and darkness. Jesus came to the world didn't know Him. Verse 11, He came to His own, and His own did not receive Him. Now you think about that. Now, again, John has this habit of mentioning something and then building on it. So he was in the world, made the world did not know Him. He even went to His own, and His own did not receive Him. Who's His own here, you think? Israel. I think so. And we're going to get to that in verse 14 a little bit. That same idea pops up. Although I think in verse 14 it could be taken in a little bigger sense. So now we have Jesus coming into the world, coming to His very own, and His own did not receive Him. But, verse 12, as many as received Him, to them He gave the right to become children of God, even to those who believe in His name. Now, I want you to think about this. So He sets up the negative. He comes to the world. The world didn't know Him. He comes to His own didn't receive Him. Man, what a hopeless gospel. And John goes, wait. Before you start thinking this is hopeless, He did go to some and they believed. He went to those, verse 12, who had received Him. And what did He do for those people? He gave them the right to become the children of God. All right, I'll go ahead and ask the question. Anything being alluded to here by that idea of becoming children of God? Maybe some ideas from the Old Testament, perhaps. What was Israel to God? His children. His children. And when you think about this, it's going to pop up again in verse 14. Israel was God's firstborn. Over and over again, that's expressed. It's expressed in the Exodus itself. He tells Moses to go in there and talk to Pharaoh, tell him to let my children go. And then, Hosea 11, one of the most gut-wrenching passages in all the entire Bible. He says, Israel's my child. But then he concludes with, you've been unfaithful to me since the very beginning. How can I give you up, my son? Oof, right in the feels. What does Jesus do? Jesus comes as the true son. Okay? Hang on to that. So, part of the idea of the Old Testament's coming to light here. As many as received Jesus, to those people He gave the right to become children of God. The true children of God by belief in His name. Now, you think about this. Verse 13, not born of blood, not of the will of the flesh, not of the will of man, but of God. Now again, if we're thinking about the Old Testament, how did somebody become a child of God in the Old Testament? How was Israel's childhood furthered to the next generation? By birth. What was the big deal for a Jew to be born of who? Of Abraham. What's going to pop up a little later in John's Gospel? Oh, see? Yeah, we're the children of Abraham. And he goes, yeah, you're the son of Satan. Woo! How would you like to invite him for a gospel meeting? But, you seeing what's happening right here? We're building that a little bit. There's a foundation here. John is saying that this isn't about physical descendants. This isn't about born of blood. This isn't about being born of man or of the will of man. This is about being born of God. That's who believes in His name. That's who becomes children of God. That's who receives Jesus. Those who choose to. Now, I'm going to break the thought here for just a second. What did I leave laying? Something on that you need to ask? Say again. Yeah. If they come to receive Him. And that's kind of the thing. At the beginning of verse 12 and the end of verse 12, you have this idea of receiving Him and believing in Him. They're the same thing. And so people who want to become children of God, well, they need to receive Jesus. Okay? Now, that does not mean receive Jesus in your heart. No, it means believe in His name, obey Him, come to Him as the Christ, the Son of God. Okay? All right, notice this then. So in verses 12 and 13, he's talking about this idea of being born of God, the children of God, not of the blood, not of the flesh, not of the man, but of God. Now verse 14, what does he do? He talks about somebody who is exactly this. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we beheld His glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness of Him and cried out, saying, This was He of whom I said, He who comes after me is preferred before me, for He was before me. And of His fullness we have all received, and grace for grace. For the law was given by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ. No one has seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, who is in the bosom of the Father, He has declared Him. So think about this. He sets up this example. You want to become a child of God? You need to accept Jesus. You need to receive Jesus. You need to believe in Jesus. Verse 14, here's why. Here's why. So verses 1 through, really verse 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Boy, now, folks, our minds should be blown. Verse 14, the Word became flesh. The Word became flesh. The idea of became is that He started being something He wasn't before. Y'all following that? He became flesh. And the text says He dwelt. He dwelt among us. Among us here would probably be a little bit of everybody. So to our point earlier, to the Jews, yes. To the apostles, yes. But even more to all humanity. He dwelt among humanity. Think about this. The text says He dwelt among us. The word here is the same word used in the Old Testament for the tabernacle. He tabernacled among us. In fact, we could even verb it like that. He became flesh and tabernacled among us. What has God always wanted to do with His human creatures? Dwell with them. And in the person of Jesus Christ, He dwelt with them more exclusively than ever before. God dwelt with His people in the tabernacle. And God, through Jesus Christ, truly comes to dwell with His people. And then notice this, and we beheld His glory. The most holy place in the tabernacle. So, most holy place in the tabernacle held the Ark of the Covenant, correct? Anybody remember there was a veil between the regular tabernacle and the most holy place? What? Oh, I'm going to give it away. What shone around the corners of that veil? The glory. Y'all seeing what's happening here? By the way, that's called the Shekinah. So the glory of God was in the most holy place, in the tabernacle. And what does verse 14 say? The Word became flesh and tabernacled among us, and we beheld His glory. John is just pulling right out of the Old Testament and saying to us, you want to talk about how this really finds fulfillment? Look at Jesus. Jesus dwelt among us. Jesus is the fullest expression of God's glory. We saw Him. And the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. In Jesus, we see the fullest expression of God. Again, that's Colossians 1:15 through 20. The invisible God is fully seen in Jesus Christ. You could also tuck in a little bit the fullness of the Godhead in Colossians 2, verse 8. So Jesus is where we see this. Jesus is full of grace and truth. This idea of superabundance, that's what we're getting here. Julie, what do you have?
So is this reasoning going through with why the veil ripped during the crucifixion?
I wouldn't necessarily connect that idea to this text, but certainly the idea of the old law being done away with, ratified, and fulfilled in Jesus, which does come up a little bit in verse 17 and 18. Okay? So verse 15, this is what John's sitting here working. This is who I was talking about. I was talking about Him. He is preferred before me, for He was before me. Think about that idea. Number one, it stresses that Jesus is eternal. John was older than Jesus, right? But he says He was before me. That means He existed before me. Number two, He's preferred before me. That means He is preeminent. John deferred to Jesus. That's going to come up again later in this text. And so verse 16, and of His fullness we have all received grace for grace. You think about that. As many as received Him. And what's he saying now? We received Him. John's talking about himself and those who accepted Jesus. Grace for grace. The idea is really hard to translate this. It's translated very well, but it's just ambiguous. The idea is almost like a tidal wave of grace. Grace upon grace, some translations will read. Grace upon grace. In Jesus, what we find, folks, is grace upon grace. Superabundance. Endless, unimaginable supply. That's Jesus, folks. And that's in contrast, verse 17, to the law. For the law was given by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ. Now, maybe we should just pause here for a second. This does not mean there was no grace and truth in the law. Once in a while, somebody will say, there was no grace in the Old Testament. And I'm like, have you read the Bible? Yeah, we're talking about the flood for VBS. Who found grace in the eyes of the Lord? Moses. No, I'm kidding. Noah. I'll say Moses tonight, I'm sure, a lot. But Noah. Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Folks, grace and truth all over the Old Testament. All over it. But the fullest expression of these two truths is in Jesus and the gospel. Did y'all follow that? Super important. I mean, let's not come in here and throw trash at the Old Testament. It was an incredible system designed by God, perfectly communicated, full of His grace and truth, and yet in Jesus Christ we have something far better. That's Hebrews, by the way. I just summarized the book of Hebrews for you in 4 seconds. All right. Verse 18 then. No one has seen God at any time. The only begotten Son who is in the bosom of the Father, He has declared Him. Let's think about this. No one has seen God at any time. You remember Moses having a conversation with God? Let me see your glory. And God says, hey, wait a minute, big boy. You can't see me and live. No man can. Yeah. And what does God do? Hides Him in the cleft of the rock, and God passes by. Y'all seeing what's happening now in John 1? John's telling us, oh yeah, there was someone who saw God. Jesus Christ, the only begotten of the Father. Only begotten, really an interesting phrase. It kind of pops up a little bit earlier, but right here just doubles down. He's the only begotten of the Father. This idea of unique son. I said it a moment ago, Israel was God's firstborn son. So to translate this, and the same kind of idea in John 3:16, to translate this as one and only son is not necessarily accurate. Jesus is God's unique Son. Okay? He's the Son God always wanted. He's the Son God always had. And so in that sense, He is the only begotten, the one and only, the unique Son. And in His bosom, in the bosom of the Father, He has declared Him. He's the only one who can tell us about the Father. Because no one has seen the Father at any time. Did y'all see that in verse 18? Folks, this is the reason we listen to Jesus, because He knows. All right, questions on any of that? Okay, boy, I know that's a lot. I told you, John 1 through 18 is probably one of the most dense sections in this gospel, which is why we just covered the first 18 verses, okay? And there's a lot of fruit we left on the tree, but we'll have to do that anyways. We got 3 minutes. I'm going to give you a minute here. Let's do some applications. What are we thinking here? Tough text, isn't it? Tough text to think about. Well, how can I apply this to my life? It's all about Jesus. So how can we apply a text that's all about Jesus?
He's the cornerstone and founder of our faith.
Okay. So He's the cornerstone and founder of our faith. Absolutely. What if we were going to try to term that so that I can do it better tomorrow? I'm sorry? Be a light. Hey, that works. Be a light. So let's think here then. Be a light. Okay, I like that. I can work with that. Think about it like this. I'm going to put the word be down. Now we complete the sentence. That's how we apply this. So be a light. What's one thing this text should do for us about Jesus in particular? Say again, Misty.
Confirm who He is.
Confirm who He is. So if we're going to put a be in front of that, what should we say?
Be a believer.
Be a believer? Okay, sure.
Be confident.
Be confident? Oh, I'll just do this then. That's not how you spell believe. I'm just going to do this, right? Somebody? Okay, no, just forget it. Don't want to know. All right. Believe. Be confident. What's a word that would maybe fit worship context? Be... Bell. Be... Come on. What's a word that would fit in a worship context? We could put it in right here about Jesus. Be Faithful, okay. Holy, okay. Think in awe. Be reverent, okay. Lots of good stuff here, by the way. Hard to think, he's probably misspelling it in his head. And you're like, I can't guess a misspelled word. That doesn't work that way. What if I said this? What if I said this? Reading this text, one of the things we should do tomorrow, better than we did today, is be deeply impressed by Jesus. Is that a fair application? I should read this text tomorrow and think, my God is so much cooler and more awesomer than I ever thought He was before. Yeah, I think so. I appreciate your attention. We'll move right into the next section on next Sunday, because Wednesday is singing. So thank you. You helped me. I hope we did some good with that work.